All right, good morning. We will be back in the book of Revelation this morning. Chapter 7 is the portion of Scripture we're at. We'll do a little bit of review. Before we get there, I hope you've all had a good week. Appreciate the mercies of the Lord. The Lord's been good to us. He's been good to me. I appreciate Him, that which He's done. Just walked by Brother Kyle, asked him if he wanted it. He could sure enough have it, but he shook his head no. But I felt for you, brother, last week when he dealing with chapter 6. You could spend a week. I mean, you need a Sunday morning just to deal with each seal and to try to run through all of them. It puts you in a tough spot. I appreciate you praying for Brother Ray and Brother Kyle and myself trying to go through this. There's so much of it that's subjective, and so much of it that you just can't be dogmatic on. I mean, that's left up to interpretation, and not all's been. You got to keep in mind when you're dealing with the book of Revelation, not all's been revealed. We don't know these things. I mean, our commentators and our writers that we like to read after and that we like to study after, man, they couldn't see things in 2020 like we're seeing things. They're just things that couldn't be revealed, but you can keep a base of thoughts and kind of some generalities that stay the same and are true. And we'll dive off into a little bit this morning, and I hope I don't confuse you. And if so, Brother Ray, you just pick the pieces up next week and see where we go from there. But anyway, Revelation, and you kind of feel like every time you start, you have to go back and pick back up from your original outline as far as outlining the book, so to speak. You feel like you got to kind of go back and pick up some, but remember, it was outlined in chapter 1, verse 19. Write the things which thou hast seen in chapter 1, the book of Revelation. What is the book of Revelation? It's the revealing of Jesus Christ. And so in chapter number 1, it's a good chapter, good way to start. It's a vision of a glorified Christ. And write these things which thou hast seen. And that's what he saw in chapter number 1. Secondly, he said, write down the things which are. And we dealt with that. That's chapters 2 and 3. And we talked about the churches. And I enjoyed going through the churches. And there's a lot of application you can make when you go through those churches. And the messages to the 7 churches. And each church has a chronological timeline, really, which reveals the church age as it's in progress. And we ended up, obviously, and of course, in the church of Laodicea, which is a lukewarm apostate church, which defines, again, where we are today. And that's where we're sitting. We're sitting in that Laodicean age. All right, and then he said, write the things which are hereafter, which we're going through now, chapters 4 and 5, the rapture of the church and the scene of heaven. And then last week, Brother Kyle taught, the scene goes from heaven to going back to earth. And in chapter 6, introduced us to the tribulation period. And after the first seal, a lot of commentators, their writings, they differ on the opinions and the timelines on the sequence of events concerning the chronological order of the book of Revelation and the chronological order of the seals. I think that's one thing that we all can get confused about. If you're like me, I want order, and I want a chronological, tell me piece by piece, give me, all right, what's happening A, all right, what's next, B, C. A lot of that with the book of Revelation, when you go through and study it, it's got a little more interpretation left up to it. I mean, look, you've got writers, good men, that's devoted their lives to the study of prophecy on these books, and they can't agree, so you just kind of there's some generalities again that you just have to kind of find. So again, many believe that the seals and the trumpets, the seals of these judgments, Kyle mentioned that last week, those 6 seals of judgment that he mentioned. Then there's another 7, the 7 seals of the trumpet judgments, and then it's followed by 7 more seals, and that's the vials and the vial judgments. A lot of writers will tell you that it follows a chronological event, that chapter 6 on those seals, and then you get into chapter 7 and 8 in the trumpet judgments. Those are all before in the first 3.5 years. And then when you get to the vial judgments, it's in the Great Tribulation, which is afterwards. A lot of them believe that. I don't know. I can't be dogmatic. There's a lot of good men that don't take that opinion, that those seals could be intermingled in between. So again, trying to find a chronological timeline of events can be challenging. But regardless, I think that about all can agree on this. And that first seal that Brother Kyle mentioned last week, that of the white horse rider, is that being the Antichrist. And that's pretty much a given. I don't believe there's much left to interpretation on that. And again, it's one of the great mysteries is identifying who is this Antichrist. It's a great mystery. Who is this Antichrist? Who is this man of sin, this son of perdition? Who is he? Who is he? How's he going to obtain his power? How does he befriend Israel? Say, well, Keith, tell us and we'll know. Well, I wish I could tell you in great detail exactly what's going to happen, but I can't. There again, I could be a little bit subjective, and I can give you some generalities, but I can't be dogmatic. Again, we're talking about some of the greatest writers that we follow. They can't agree, so I can't be dogmatic on some of these things. But I think it is of great interest, and I think that if we're not careful, don't give yourselves an excuse not to read and to study and to try to follow through it. There are a lot of gleanings. And the more I read, the more I'm just amazed at the Word and at the Bible. It's just an amazing, amazing book. And you've heard Brother Rudy say that a lot. The more you read, the more you realize, the less you know. And it's just so true. The more you study and the more you find out, you can open up one thing and have something confirmed to you, but it just opens up 10 more thoughts that you never could have imagined. And you just realize, number one, what a great book this is, and then it makes you realize just how little do you really know. But a lot of questions. We all have questions in Revelation. And some people find it interesting and some people don't. It's just, me personally, I take great interest in it. It's just, I'm curious. I find it interesting. It's an interesting book. So again, we can't be dogmatic on it all, but the Bible gives us glimpses. And again, glimpses of the Antichrist and that white horse rider. One of the earliest glimpses we had was back in our last quarter. We were in Daniel and Ezekiel and Zechariah and a lot of prophetical things. But Daniel 11, in the story of Antiochus Epiphanes, and you've heard Brother Rudy preach on him, the Syrian king who terrorized Israel some 175 years before Christ was born. And Antiochus Epiphanes foreshadowed the Antichrist in that time. And there's a lot of prophecy, and about all writers agree on this as well. But just some highlights that you take away from the book of Daniel, some character traits that you can take away from that, just some things that you can be looking for right here in 2020. That period of time was a great time of anti-Semitism. There was a lot of people that were angry at and were just against Israel and against the Jewish people. And look, we live in the days of anti-Semitism. It's back on the rise. I kind of need you to go back to your mind this virus, everything that's happened in the last couple of months have got us all centered in on it. But if you go back into January and February, a lot of the things I'm going to talk about here these next few minutes, somewhat as an introduction, these things were going on in January and February. They're still going on. It's just not as prevalent because nobody's talking about it. But again, it was a great time of anti-Semitism, great resentment of the Jews in Israel. And there's a rise on that today. There's a rise. Antiochus Epiphanes, he obtained the kingdom through flatteries, with hope and promise of peace. I believe that white horse rider will follow through and will do the same thing. He's going to be a great politician, a great political speaker. He negotiated false alliances and treaties. He worked deceitfully. And there again, he had no intention of honoring the treaties and alliances that he had. I believe it's a character trait that we can look for in the coming of the Antichrist. He was a man of prosperous. He obtained allegiances by lavishing wealth upon those that followed him. So he's going to be, look, just about all evil, it comes down to it, just about all evil, follow the money. Follow money, follow the wealth. There's wealth, there's greed, and there's power. You can just about attribute all evil to that. And so no doubt this white horse rider going to increase his standing by using a lot of these same tactics. And again, that was early on in the book of Daniel. There's many more glimpses the Bible gives us as far as that, but I don't want to just delve all into that. And then you think again about another question. I'm just kind of rambling a little bit before we get into chapter 7. You think, And what I'm trying to do, I want to whet your appetite a little bit for what's to come. We're not far getting into the chapters 11, 12, 13, 14, getting into this thing of the Antichrist, all right? So how does he deceive and befriend Israel? Well, I don't know. I can't tell you dogmatically. I just can't. I don't know. There's so many differing opinions on it, but there is one opinion, and I rehearsed this to Joe and Brother Wayne this week a little bit. There is one opinion that it fascinates me, and I mentioned it in the Sunday school class, I don't know, a couple of months ago, but I've seen some other things since then, and it's just, again, it doesn't mean that what I'm going to say is going to happen. I want to whet your appetite, and I hope that you get an increase in things of current events and current timelines, and if anything, see just how close we are. This thing is about to wrap up. And I believe that, Our toes are kind of in the water, so to speak. But there's one of my favorite writers to follow is M.R. Dehan, and I've mentioned that before, and he wrote that book on the chemistry of the blood and some others. And he's got some good writings on Revelation and signs of the times and the end time events and that kind of thing. But you think about, again, how will this Antichrist deceive Israel? How's he going to befriend Israel? I'm going to give you a theory that he mentions. You say, well, Keith, is this what you think? I can't say. But he sure thinks so. Now, keep in mind, these things I'm going to give you, I'm going to hurry. He mentioned these some 60 years ago. And when I look at that, he wrote these things 60 years ago, and I look at it in light of where we're at today, again, it just interests me, and I hope that it'll interest you. But M.R. Dehan gives a theory, and again, you can't be dogmatic to it. Is that the Antichrist is going to befriend Israel, and his theory is really found in Ezekiel 38. Some interesting scriptures. I'm going to turn to Ezekiel 38. You don't have to, but I'm going to turn there, and there's some interesting scriptures. See, you can't take Ezekiel 38 out of the Bible. It's there. It's there. And what he says is, this battle in chapter number 38, and I'm not going to read it for time's sake. I'm just going to make some remarks about it. But in chapter 2, he mentions Gog and Magog. And Magog is all universally thought as the land of in Russia. And Magog is going to team up with some other countries, which is Russia, that are listed in verses 5 and 6. And it's just an interesting thing to me that these countries that they're going to team up with, how prevalent and relevant they are today. So you've got Magog in chapter number 2. And they're going to, according to Ezekiel 38, and this is in the latter times, there's going to be a war in Israel. This is the grounds. They're going to team up with Persia, Ethiopia, Libya, and with them the shield of the helmet. In verse number 6, Gomer and all his bands in the house of Togarmah and the north quarters and all of his bands and many people with that. You start looking those people up. Persia's Iran. The biggest one, Gomer, is modern-day Turkey. I don't know if you follow much current events, but you watch the relationship between Russia and Turkey. Keep up with that. Keep up with that. Keep up with your readings on that and how Turkey, which is Asia Minor, is somewhat of a puppet to Russia. But Ethiopia, the ancient Ethiopia was Cush. It could be Iraq, the land of Iraq, Libya. So you've got Russia up here, and you've got Turkey down below it, and you've got these Muslim nations that all surround, the key is they all surround the Mediterranean Sea, and I'm going some over that. And so this, according to Ezekiel 38, these countries will align and confederate themselves together, and they're going to come up against the nation of Israel. All right, so what happens after that? Well, these nations, Dr. Dehan believes that these nations will confront Israel, and they'll do so in the first 3.5 years, and this is where the Antichrist will come in with all deception to deceive Israel. All right, so to Israel's defense is going to come the Antichrist. Remember, he's going to be, we'll get into this later. He's going to be the head of the newly confederated European Union. All right, and again, we'll discuss that later. But look at who he allies himself with. Look at verse number 13. Sheba and Dedan, which would be Saudi Arabia. But where I'm interested is right here, in the merchants of Tarshish with its young lions. Well, Tarshish, what's Tarshish? You go back and study and look at your history, and it comes out that it's Great Britain. It's Great Britain. So who are the young lions that came out of Tarshish? It's the colonies that come from Great Britain. The young lions are the colonies. It's your English-speaking countries, Canada, Australia, and the biggest of the young lions is America. We were all colonized out of. You can throw in New Zealand. It's the English-speaking countries today. So his theory goes that this Antichrist will lead this European Union and that these other countries will align themselves with it and defeat Gog, Magog, and Russia and these Muslim countries that's coming up to fight against and to try to take over Jerusalem. So you say, well, why would Russia and Turkey want to destroy Israel and overtake Jerusalem? How does that make any sense? Well, again, I just challenge you to go back and look at some of your current events. And again, I said you can look at most wars and things of evil in that age. It begins with power and wealth and money. And if you look at what's going on right now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this or not, but it all centers around the Mediterranean Sea, which is right there in Europe, which is right there at the hub of the tribulation, I believe, with the Antichrist. And I'm telling you what it's all associated with right now. Anyways, things could change. I understand that. But as he wrote this 60 years ago, there's no way he could see this. But there's a lot of brouhaha going on right now, and it's all over natural gas. It's all over natural gas. Currently, Russia prospers by fueling all of Europe, Eastern Europe, with their natural gas. But there's been some archaeological and some studies done, not archaeological, but some studies done in the last 10 years that have been off the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. And these studies have found that there's large reserves of natural gas that are worth billions and billions and billions of dollars, and there's enough natural gas to go around for decades. So if you're Russia, wouldn't you be a little nervous about that? You're going to lose all that money and that wealth, and you've got Turkey. So why, there again, Israel, what does Israel have to do with that? Well, where's Israel located? They're right there in the middle of it. They're right there in the middle of it. And the way this thing's being portioned off is you've got so many miles coming off the coast of your country that you have access to the drilling rights, and that's what it's all. I don't know how many of you remember it. You go Google it. You go back and look. Back in February, and there was lots of talk about Russia and Turkey sending troops over to Libya. Don't know if you remember it or not, but go Google it. I know you've got better things to do, but go Google it and see. This was going on as early as February. And you've got to know the geography of the land. You've got the Mediterranean Sea here. You've got Russia up here, and you've got Turkey here. You've got the sea, which is my arm right here, and you've got drilling rights so many miles inland from each country. Well, right across opposite from Turkey is Libya right there. They're sending those troops. They're trying to block the Mediterranean Sea, and they would for their pipelines and their drilling rights, they would be able to control it. And there's a lot going on about that right now, and again, that's not anything that's make-believe. This was getting pretty heated back in February. And again, why? To control the offshore pipelines and drilling rights. And again, you just go Google the Mediterranean Sea, and you can go and read a lot of this for yourselves. I'm going to close this little thought here, and I'm still on my introduction. But I just want to make you think. That's all I want to do this morning. I want to make you think. I'm going to close this with an article that I looked up and printed off. This is just a closing paragraph. It was a real lengthy article, and there's several articles. Go Google it. Mediterranean Sea Natural Gas Wars. Just go Google it. The end of this article stated this. This was an article that was written over in Europe. The Eastern Mediterranean, including North Africa, has become the focus of ever-widening conflicts with all imperialist and regional powers determined to pursue their own rapacious demands for control over the region's wealth and resources. As U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper warned, and this was in February of this year, Defense Secretary Mark Esper warned at the Munich Security Conference, we are now in an era of great power competition, meaning that we must move away from low-intensity conflict and prepare once again for high-intensity warfare. The writer's closing remarks are this. The stage is being set for explosive conflicts, potentially encompassing 3 continents, over the domination of North Africa and the Mediterranean Sea. But the Eastern Mediterranean is only one of a number of potential flashpoints, the Horn of Africa, South China Sea, or the Arctic, to name a few, but where these competing strategic interests could lead to an all-out confrontation between major military powers, including nuclear-armed imperialist states. As far as the major powers are concerned, the entire world is in play with devastating consequences for humanity. Now you're saying, well, Keith, is that the end time? I don't know. I can't tell you. All I want to do is whet your appetite. There's a possibility. But there's things going on behind the scenes that we're just not aware of. But it's there. It's there. Things are going on. We're closer than, I believe we're a lot closer than we think. And on that other point, what interests me, just throwing it out here, he mentions about those colonies that's gonna come together. We mentioned about Tarshish with her young lions. Well, I'm gonna give you something else to go Google. We said Ezekiel mentioned the pact with Great Britain and her colonies, America, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. It's the English-speaking nations. Go Google Anglosphere Confederation. And you know, there's already maps that have been printed out of this confederation, behind the scenes goings on of maps for the English-speaking people to get together. They've got this map, and it's got several maps have been shown, but it's highlights of parts of the Britain's map, the United States stripes, Canada's maple leaf, and just letting something that represents each of those 5 countries. Anglosphere Confederation. And again, you saying that's going to happen? No, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying it sure is interesting. What I take out of it is this. This thing was written back in Ezekiel 38. Ezekiel's prophecy of these things. You're not taking it out of the Bible. It's in there. What's actually going to happen, I don't know. I can't tell you. Dr. Dehan has his theory. That's great. He has his theory. Is that going to happen? I don't know. I can't tell you. But what I can tell you is that is of interest is that he can write this thing 60 years ago, and you look at today's current events and how things just, you can just see how that could be a driving force behind it. And again, only telling you that to whet your appetite. I hope I didn't confuse you. I'm not trying to confuse anyone, and most of you may not be like me. You may not have much interest in that. But boy, I do. I find it real interesting. And so with that little bit of a lengthy review behind us, now we can go to chapter number 7. And let's look at chapter 7 of Revelation. And we'll see where we picked up after those 6 seals. And again, I just want you to think about these things. It's fascinating times that we live in. And we're so blinded right now by what's going on with this virus. And this virus has somewhat put a pause on not South Carolina, the whole world. It's put a pause in everything. But I promise you, God's plan is still in place. Nothing's caught him by surprise. This is all just part of it. All just part of it. Now, we roll back over into chapter number 7. And when we finished off, Brother Kyle left off last week with these 6 seals. And again, there's so much there in those seals. It's just impossible to do in a 30 or 40 minute time frame. Just impossible. But you get over to chapter number 7, and I thought, well, I knew I was going to be gone last week. And I said, I think I'm going to call and get Brother Charles to teach for me. And then where I looked at, I said, I like Brother Charles. I just don't think I want to do that to him. I mean, you think back in all your years you've been in church. Do you really hear much preaching in chapter number 7 of the book of Revelation? You don't, the 144,000 Jews. But there's some interesting things in here and some interesting things to pick up on the martyred saints. And that we'll spend just a few minutes dealing with that now. But you get into chapter number 7. Chapter number 7 is called a parenthetical chapter, meaning that there's a pause. There's a parenthesis that takes place between the 6th seal and the 7th seal. John Phillips says chapter number 7 is recorded events that don't take place until later in the book. It's an introduction to these events. So next week you're opening up to the 7th seal and the 7 trumpets. So in between this, there's just this little parenthetical chapter that's in here. And let me read it if I don't do anything else and make a few comments. Chapter 7, after these things, I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, and the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the four angels, to whom it was given to hurt the sea, or hurt the earth and the sea, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Verse 4. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000, all of the tribes of the children of Israel. The tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000. Reuben, 12,000. Gad, 12,000. The tribe of Aser were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Naphtali were sealed 12,000. Manasseh were 12,000. Simeon, 12,000. Of the tribe of Levi, 12,000. Issachar, 12,000. Zebulun, 12,000. Joseph, 12,000. Of the tribe of Benjamin were sealed 12,000. 12 tribes, 12,000, 144,000 sealed Jews. And you get on to verse number 9. There was a second group of people that are mentioned. And after this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues. And they stood before the throne, before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne and unto the Lamb. And all the angels stood round about the throne and about the elders and about the four beasts, and fell before the throne on their faces, and they worshiped God, saying, Amen, blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be unto our God forever and ever. Amen. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in white robes, and whence came they? I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said to me, These are they which came out of the great tribulation, and have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore they before the throne, and serve him day and night in his temple. And he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, and neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them into the living fountains of waters, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. So this little parenthetical chapter number 7, here in the book of Tribulation, we see some saints that's going to be found in heaven. You say, are folks going to get saved during the tribulation period? Yep. There's going to be, according to what we've read, there's going to be multitudes that are going to be saved. You say, well, that cuts against everything I thought I've heard, that nobody's going to get saved. We'll explain that in just a minute. But there's going to be people saved. But you got to remember, it's a different dispensation. The church is gone. The church is gone. So within this little parenthetical chapter, it starts in verse number 1. It says, after these things. What are these things? Well, after the opening of the seals in chapter 6, and before the seventh seal is going to be opened in chapter number 8, John says, I saw. And he sees these four angels sitting on the four corners of the earth, up in the north, the south, the east, and the west. And these four angels are controlling the winds that they blow not on the earth. Now you think about that. You know what happens if the wind doesn't blow? Have you thought about that? If there's no wind blowing, you naturally say, well, we won't have any breeze. There wouldn't be any waves. Pollutants, there would be nowhere for the pollutants. They would remain in the air. The wind wouldn't be able to blow them away. But there's greater consequences than that, and this was a judgment that was about to happen. And before this, the second angel arose from the east, telling them to hold. Don't do it, just to hold off. But the long-term effects, you've got increased temperature extremes. Where it's hot, it's going to be much hotter. Where it's cold, it'll be much colder. And it's not really going to take a lot of time. If the wind doesn't blow, your plants will begin to die. Animals and humans also would begin to die, and most of it being dying of dehydration. And that was a judgment that's about to befall in the time of tribulation before this angel comes and puts a halt to it, says stop until we can seal these 144,000. And again, this angel comes up in verse 3, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. That other, and to seal just means it's for security, for protection. Hurt not the earth. It just lets you know, God's got this thing under control. The winds, the waves, you can talk to Mother Nature if you want to, but God's got nature in control. He owns it all. It's all at his beckoning and his call. It's all the atmosphere, the stars, everything, astrology, everything. God's got everything under control. And so, these sealed servants, all we know about these servants is this. There's 144,000 of them, and they're Jews. That's what it tells us. And God's seal is going to protect, he's going to protect the 144,000 from judgment during the tribulation. And the 144,000 or 12,000 Jews from each tribe. You know, many commentators suggest that these 144,000 Jews are going to be used as witnesses or messengers to preach the gospel of the kingdom. Well, where do they get that? Well, you got to roll back over into Matthew 24. And Matthew 24, on that Olivet Discourse, is a great chapter. And Matthew 24 lines up with chapter 6 of the book of Revelation, the seals that Brother Kyle talked about last week. And you go over to Matthew 24, and your verse 5 talks about, verse 4, take heed, let no man deceive you. Many shall come. There's your white horse rider. Verse 6 talks about wars and rumors of wars, your red horse. Parts of verse 7 talks about famine, the black horse, talks about pestilences, earthquakes, divers places, the beginning of sorrows. In verse number 9, the pale horse. In verses 10, 11, and 12, and 13, the fifth seal, and that being a martyrdom. And right after that, look at verse 14. And this is where a lot of commentators think that the 144,000 are going to be preachers and ministers or witnesses for Christ. 24:14, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, then shall the end come. The gospel of the kingdom, the gospel of the kingdom. Kind of interesting thought there, the gospel of the kingdom. Not the church age. It's not the gospel of grace anymore. It's the gospel of the millennial. There's a king coming. The king's coming. Now, you got the Antichrist who set himself up as the king and wants all to bow before him. So can you not see a conflict right there? But they're preaching the king's coming. The king's coming. These 144,000 are going to be sealed. There'll be no harm come to them. And these are Jews. The other part you got to flip to Revelation 14. We don't really have time. All it tells us about these 144,000, they're redeemed from the earth. They're not defiled with women. It says that they're virgins, not given in marriage. They've not committed any fornication with the world. They're redeemed as first fruits, the restored nation of Israel, and they're found without fault. And that's kind of what you got on these 144,000. But then you get over here to the second group of people in verses 9 through 18. Who are they? Well, verse number 9 says, of all nations, kindreds, tongues, stood before the throne alone, clothed in white robes with palms in their hands. Verse number 9 says, they're a great multitude. It's just a multitude of nations. You say, but Keith, I thought nobody's going to get saved during the tribulation. No, there's going to be people saved in the tribulation, but not saved like me and you think. Not saved. They're not going to be having church with the opportunity of grace and the Holy Ghost convicting them like we've got now. But this multitude of nations, they're going to be in white robes. He sees them in white robes, the robes of righteousness and virtue. They've got palms in their hands. Palms are of joy and of victory. And they've got praise in their mouth. In verse number 10, they cry with a loud voice, saying, salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne. All right, so who are these multitude of people? Well, they're blood-washed believers who made it out of tribulation. They're the martyred saints who refused to take the mark of the beast. And again, I say, you say, that's comforting to know if I'm a lost man, I don't need to get saved now. When I make it to the tribulation time and things heat up, I'll just wait and get saved then. It's not going to work that way. It's not going to work that way. You say, why don't you think it's going to work that way? I don't think it's going to work that way because you can't get away from 2 Thessalonians. And in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness and unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. They didn't receive it. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. You're not going to wait and get saved. You're not going to wait and get saved. You'll end up taking that mark of the beast. You'll end up taking that mark. And you look at this plight this plight of these martyred saints. It's interesting to me. Look at verse 16. We'll close right here. Look at verse 16. Here's where it's interesting. The Bible says that they shall hunger no more. It says they shall hunger no more. Well, what's Revelation 13:17 says? That no man might buy or sell, save that he had the mark of the beast. These men aren't going to be able to afford any food. There's going to be famine in the land to boot. They're starving. They're going to be martyred saints is what they're going to be. And then it says, neither shall they thirst anymore. Well, what do you mean neither shall they thirst anymore? They're not going to have anything to drink? Wait till we get to the vial judgments. You get over into Revelation 16:4, and the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and the fountains of the waters, and they became blood. Be no more drinking water, be undrinkable. You get over to, look at the next one, and it says that they shall hunger no more, they'll thirst no more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. Where does that come into place? Wait till you get back over to these vial judgments. Revelation 16:8 and 9. The fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given unto him to scorch men with fire. Verse 9, and men were scorched with great heat. And these are some of the tribulations and the judgments that these men are going to have to come after. These are some of the martyrdoms they'll end up suffering. But you get into, I like where it ends in verse 17. For the Lamb, which is in the midst of the throne, shall feed them and shall lead them into living fountains of waters. The very last sentence right here. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. It means all their sorrows will be removed. All their sorrows will be removed. So will there be people being saved? Sure there will. The fifth seal tells us that. But it's the seal of martyrdom. And those that refuse in the times of God's grace that we're in now, in the church age, if you refuse now, I don't believe you're going to make it through tribulation. You'll cow down and take that mark and take the quote-unquote the easy way out. All right? I don't believe you'll make it through there. You just won't. But there will be people that get saved. They will refuse to take the mark. Boy, they're going to suffer for it. They're going to suffer for it. Will the 144,000 be the messengers? Will they be the ones preaching to them? I can't be dogmatic. I can't tell you that. A lot of commentators believe so just because they go back to Matthew 24:14. Revelation doesn't say they're preachers. It doesn't say that. Matthew 24:14 insinuates that. I don't know. I can't tell you that for sure. Again, all I know is at the end of this thing, at the end of it, God's going to wipe away all tears from their eyes. And so they've got a hope in that. But a better hope that we've got now that we're saved is that we're going to miss the tribulation altogether. Now, I hope all of us in here this morning have made our calling and election sure, and that we know we're saved. You know that you know that you know, because we don't want to go through it. I don't want to go through it. You don't want to go through the tribulation. And we've got our way of escape now. But that doesn't neglect us from the fact, and it ought to break our heart for those that are lost, that we may work with, that we're associated with, go to school with, however it may be. Boy, there's a lost people all around us. And it ought to really burden us and break us to realize just how close we are. And again, I believe our toes are in the water. And I said all that in the beginning. I wasn't trying to confuse you with all this talk of the alliances and how the Antichrist might befriend Israel, and he may befriend them by coming to their aid in that first 3.5 years and taking over that battle, and then turn around and say, go ahead and build that temple. And boy, they think they've really got a friend in him, and he's going to turn on them. But tribulation is a bad, bad time. And it's just getting started. Revelation 6, those first 7 seals just got things just heating up. Wait till we get to these trumpets, and especially where do these vial judgments come across? Be no time to be living on earth. So closing thoughts. Again, use the book of Revelation. Use these teachings on the tribulation period. Use these days and these times we're living in. Realize judgment's coming. Our toes are in the water. Judgment's coming. And challenge yourselves to live better, to live better for the Lord in these last days, to do what's right. Be pleasing unto the Lord. The youth choir has that song saying, He is really all that matters. And you know when this thing wraps up, at the end of it, Jesus is really all that matters. What are we doing for Him? What's our life? Does our life count for Him? You know, and that's where it's all going to be. So again, I appreciate your attention this morning. Not trying to confuse you on these, and like I said, Dr. D, it's just a thought. I don't know. Like I said, was that going to happen? Couldn't tell you. But it's an interesting thing. And then many people have many different opinions on these types of scriptures and that kind of thing. We can't be dogmatic on any of it. But again, whet your appetite and just stay in tune with some current events, because there's a lot of things that are happening out there that are just flies right over our head that we have no idea about. Just keep your eyes on some of those things. All right, thank you for your attention.